I think we all have had a moment in life that we would never want to repeat. And yet at some point, we probably did. And when that happened, we probably thought to ourselves, what the heck is wrong with me? Why did I do that? I'm here to assure you that there's nothing wrong with you. But you probably have some patterns written into your nervous system that were learned far before you had the awareness to question them. Let me ask you this. When is the last time you caught yourself doing something you swore you would never do? Maybe it was going out when you swore you would never drink again. Maybe it was yelling at your kids when you promised you would never act like your parents. Whether it was a habit or a reaction, maybe that choice didn't feel like a choice at all. Maybe it came automatically. And maybe a lot of the choices that we make aren't made with so much free will like we think. You see, when we're kids, our brains are so absorbent. They're like sponges. When we're in the age about 2 to 7 years old, we are in what's called the theta brainwave state. Now, this is a super fancy technical term for an absorbent state of learning. And we are taking in everything around us. We are soaking in how people love to how they fight. We are absorbing what feels safe and what feels normal. We are forming every instinct and opinion about ourselves and the world, and we're pocketing that deep in our brains. And we're using it to form our entire belief system that we're going to take with us for the rest of our lives. This becomes the lens through which we view every choice, every relationship. We make every judgment, every possibility in life. For the rest of our lives, we form in this age group. This is also the part of our life when our brains and our nervous system learn to equate familiarity with safety. This means that if you grew up in a home where you felt safe and loved, and like you could go to your parents for anything and they would always be there, that's the type of relationship you're going to grow up and find yourself in as an adult. However, if you grew up in a home where chaos was normal, where you were always walking on eggshells, where you had to prove your worth in order to feel loved, that is the energy that you are going to find yourself in your relationships as an adult. Not just romantic relationships, but in friendships, in your work environments, your bosses, your relationship with money, with health. Because what's familiar to your nervous system is what feels safe to your nervous system. So even if you want to have a healthy, safe relationship, if it isn't familiar to your nervous system is going to say, hey, this isn't safe. We don't know what to expect. We're going to reject this because you didn't heal those wounds. So many of us try to hide from our poor childhoods or run from our mistakes, ignore them, thinking that if we just shove them away and never look at them, that they never happened, that we never have to look at them again, and that they won't affect our lives. I was included in this. I'm not judging you. I used to lie to my friends on the playground as a kid because my dad was in prison, and I used to tell everyone he was a truck driver, and that's why he was never around. Everyone just thought I didn't have a dad. But what happens when we don't heal our trauma, don't talk about it, don't look at it? It doesn't go away, but it becomes part of our personality. anger problems, people pleasing, anxiety, depression. And it doesn't stop with us. It gets passed down to the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, until somebody finally gets sick of it and breaks that cycle. I personally used to think that I had inherited my mother's awful taste in men. But it turns out I had actually inherited something much older and much deeper than that. Patterns and belief systems and behaviors were silently shaping who I was, how I survived, and even how I saw myself. I had inherited a nervous system that confused intensity with love. I thought that if it didn't feel intense and at sometimes scary, that meant that they didn't love me. Now this would end up biting me in the butt and completely changing my life. I want to tell you a story of the night that changed not only my life forever, but the generations after me. This is the story of the night that I almost lost my life to domestic violence. This is a cycle that had been repeating in my family for generations, and I had no idea. Now, I knew that my mom was in an abusive relationship, and her mother had been in abusive relationships, and her mothers before that. I knew that this was going on, but I didn't realize that this was a generational cycle. Now, the night that I almost lost my life, my children were home. In fact, I was holding my 1-year-old son as I came seconds away from losing my life. And in those absolutely terrifying moments, and I do mean terrifying, something felt oddly familiar. And it shouldn't have, because although this wasn't my first abusive relationship, this was the first time I had been in this specific situation. So my body should not have known what to do automatically. But freeze. Don't make it worse. Just make it out alive. Protect them. Make it the next 30 seconds. My brain was going. My body knew what to do. But how, right? It was those early conditioning years, the theta brainwave state that I had been talking about earlier. Without me even realizing it, my body had been conditioned for this very thing. Because it had learned it from my mother before me, who had learned it from her mother before her, who had learned it from her mother before her. It's a generational cycle. So thanks to my mother and her mother and her mother, I had been prepared for this moment without even realizing it. Now, in those moments that I was convinced I wasn't going to make it out of that room alive, I had a very painful realization. You see, all these years, I had been convinced that I was doing something noble. I was giving up my happiness and my mental health for my kids so that they could have a yard, a home, a family under one roof. I thought that I was doing the best thing for them. But in reality, I was making things so much worse for them because I was letting the cycle repeat. The control, the fear, the letting people walk all over me. That situation I was in that very moment was their future. That was their inheritance. That was my inheritance catching up to me. This was what they were going to receive from me. All of the things that I had sacrificed didn't matter because this is what they were going to get if I didn't get out of this cycle. That's when I realized that if I didn't wake up and break this cycle, it didn't matter if I made it out alive and got into another relationship with a new man. It would be the same thing because it wasn't the relationship that needed fixing. It was the pattern inside of me. The things that had been passed down for generations. The things that I had learned in those early years from my broken family who had learned it in their early years, from their broken family who had learned it in their early years. That is what the generational cycles are. I realized that if I didn't break these cycles, this was their future. I didn't want that for them, and I didn't want it for me. I always thought that I was too late to break cycles because I already had kids, and I knew that the whole epigenetics thing where, you inherit DNA from your family, and I knew all of these things. For those of you who don't know, epigenetics are things that are passed down. Ancestors' experience affect your genes and how they express themselves. Certain genes are activated by certain experiences that you go through. So, like, if your great grandpa went through the war and experienced trauma, you could inherit that DNA, but it could lie dormant within you until you go through a divorce or a car accident or something traumatic, and then it wakes up. So that shows us that this isn't just a metaphorical concept. This is physically inheriting these trauma patterns, right? So I knew this. So I thought I had already doomed my kids because I already had them before I learned all of this, so they were already going to inherit this. But I didn't realize that I could show them how to break these cycles, that it wasn't too late, that not only could I break them still, but I could show them how to have strength and bravery. I could show them the most important thing, and that's empowerment. That is choosing to break the chains. That it didn't matter how old you are or if you already have kids. So when I changed, when I chose to start our lives over from absolutely nothing, from scratch, no money, no support system, when my body was still healing and my nervous system was still on high alert, and I still chose to do the hard things, to put in the work, to do the shadow work, to look at my demons, to look at my shadows and my hard childhood, to look at what had been passed down, to choose boundaries over fear and self-respect over what was comfortable. When I made all of these choices, not only in front of my kids, but with them, and show them and hold their hand along the way, when I made those choices and I changed, I got to see them change too. They got to see what respect looks like and what courage feels like. They got to pave the way for their own future. They didn't have to inherit what I did. They got to see what I went through and choose something different. They got to watch me choose different for myself. That is something to look up to. I wasn't just breaking my own patterns, although I am pretty relieved I'm not passing down that toxic taste in men to my own daughter. But I was breaking generational cycles. So notice what feels automatic in you. How do you respond when you feel triggered? Do you forgive too quickly? Do you shrink yourself down to make other people feel comfortable? This is how we actually end cycles. Not by blaming others for the things that they've done to us. Not by feeling ready, because you're never going to feel ready. But by awareness. The things that you feel when you start to make these choices and these changes, those are the fingerprints to the inheritance that you carry. And you can leave a new inheritance. One of courage, of love, of self-respect. You can be the first generation to heal these wounds and break these chains. You can be the first one in your lineage to heal. It can start with you. One choice, one act of courage can influence not only your life, can leave a new future not only for you and your kids and the future generations. You impact your children, your neighbors, your friends, strangers who see your story on the internet. One choice can ripple through generations. One person's choice to change a cycle can ripple through generations of conditioning. One person can influence one person to change, who can influence one person to change, and that's how we change the world. And it can start with you right now.